Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 13th of April of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. But before we start discussing the situation on the ground, probably would like to discuss with you the most joyful and funny moments of the special military operation. If you remember, just yesterday we talked how the young Ukrainian managed to cross the river and to escape evacuation, to escape mobilization, and to escape the, let's say, the death on somewhere on Avdiivka or in Kupin's direction. We discussed the video how Ukrainian tried to cross the river. The river is very fast, and at some moment there was a very high chances that this guy could be, let's say, taken by the river somewhere further along the way, and he might sunk somewhere as well, but he managed to survive, and the most important, he managed to save his life. And we talked that very likely during the next few days we're going to receive significant number of updates from the Ukrainians who try to cross the river or something like this. And today we've started receiving first details about the situation, and this is Google, and this is the Google search. And if you take a look at this screen, it's in Russian, of course, and there is like the first the high ranked request is how to cross the river Tisu. So probably after the Ukrainians saw this video, the Ukrainians start searching how to cross the river. This is Tisu river, by the way, and according to information we have, there were around 2.5 million requests just about the situation. So once again, I believe that in the very near future the Ukrainians will be forced to redeploy up to one brigade on the direction with the purpose not to allow the civilians to penetrate the defense belt, not to penetrate the Ukrainian border, and to evacuate in direction of Romania, escaping mobilization. Now let's move to the situation on the ground, and first we're going to talk about Zaporizhzhia, Kherson, Zaporizhzhia directions. And according to information we have, during the previous 24 hours the Ukrainians conducted massive missile strike all over the entire Zaporizhzhia region. The sources reported that there were lots of missile strikes in Tokmak with the cluster rounds, but not just Tokmak was under very heavy fire. The Ukrainians published additional videos of how they managed to discover the Russian artillery positions, air defense positions, and how they were destroying them with hammer strikes. The same story we can see in the village by the name of Acherituvata. The Ronin, say, FPV drone and artillery forces were hunting and attacking the Russian positions. Very likely the Russians started concentration of forces on Tokmak, in the vicinity of Tokmak and Zaporizhzhia, with the purpose to start offensive operation, because probably you know that lots of sources, Western sources, start discussion the possible Russian summer offensive, and the Western, let's say, analytics are saying, Institute of Study of War, are saying that very likely the Russians are going to use 4 directions of attacks. The Russians are going to attack in Donetsk, Kherson, Lugansk, and Zaporizhzhia directions, in addition to a possible attack on Kharkiv. So if the Russians are ever going to start these directions to attack, obviously they need to start concentration of forces right now. So maybe that was the reason why the Ukrainians were bombing and attacking Zaporizhzhia area so much. Now we are moving further. We are going to South Donetsk direction. As you can see, we have lots of geolocations. We will bypass for the evening update the Vremivka tactical bridgehead, because nothing happened during the day, just destroyed bridge that we were talking about during the previous updates in the area of Velika Novoselka. So nothing special, no more progress from the Russian side, but interesting details are coming from South Donetsk, from the area between Ugledar and Novomykhailivka. The Russians continue clearing operation with FPV drones, trying to suppress and destroy a significant number of Ukrainian positions, and mainly the Russians were concentrated on the communication equipment, radars, some different retranslators, and different types of equipment that Ukrainians use for communication and other different purposes. So the Russians were suppressing them, and obviously that was also part of, say, preparation before further offensive. Interesting video took place, interesting event took place to the northwest of the coal mine. On this video, for example, we can see the flying of the Russian drone in direction of Ukrainian positions. On the video you can see the Ukrainian personnel carrier, or BMP-2. It's a fighting, let's say, infantry vehicle, and as you can see, that fighting infantry vehicle was attacking something in a distance, and when the Russians reached this let's say, vehicle, they start bombing and attacking this armored vehicle with FPV drone. So the thing is that the distance, the most important thing in that video is the distance. Obviously, the Ukrainians in that vehicle wasn't attacking the Russians somewhere in Pavlovka, because the distance in the case would be around, let's say, 3 kilometers, even more. So that's why I suppose that Ukrainians were attacking the Russians somewhere on this line, and very likely the Russians probably also started concentration of forces, or maybe the Russians during the previous few days conducted some offensive operation on this direction, which was invisible to us. I'm trying to say that neither the Russians nor the Ukrainians published any updates about that attack, but obviously something interesting is going to start on this direction, and very soon. Now we are moving to Novomykhailivka area, and today we got two updates from the village itself. First one we received from Syriac, and he stated yesterday at let's say 8 p.m. of the local time. He stated that very bad situation for Ukrainian army in Novomykhailivka. Russian army pushing from north and south forced Ukrainian troops to retreat from the southern trenches of the town towards Paraskovyevka. So according to him, the Ukrainians abandoned their positions and moved in this direction. And later we got the same, not later, but today on the 13th of April, we got report from the Russian sources somewhere at 4 p.m. of the local time that Novomykhailivka has fallen completely, and that the Russians established complete control over the territory. Also, the source reported not to be in a hurry to wait official statement, but according to him, as I understand, the Russians will officially announce the fall of Novomykhailivka within the next few days. Probably Novomykhailivka they're going to be the same story as with Pervomayska. If you remember, 4 days ago the Russians established the flag in the western part, and just today, a small spoiler, just today the Ministry of Defense reported about complete control over the village. Very likely something like this is going to happen with Novomykhailivka. Probably maybe on Monday or Tuesday of the next week the Russians will announce this. Anyway, regarding the situation in the area, we see significant concentration of Russian fire in Konstantinovka. For example, on this video we can see another ammo depot that was discovered by the Russians with a drone, and when the Russians discovered it, they start bombing and attacking this territory. Also, there was a position of artillery system. Anyway, as a result of accurate artillery strike, the Russians managed to destroy either the Ukrainian artillery system and a small warehouse in the area. After that, there was a very heavy secondary detonation and fire as well. And furthermore, the Russians continue bombing the Konstantinovka with FABs. So what is going on there? Obviously, we see that the situation in Konstantinovka, first of all, remind us the situation in Novomykhailivka that used to be half a year ago. If we increase the numbers of updates since the beginning of April, we're going to see significant Russian focus in the area. First of all, in the eastern part, less focus on the western part. We also see a certain focus of the Russian armed forces in Paraskovyevka. So now Novomykhailivka is no longer the main, let's say, battle area. Now Paraskovyevka and Konstantinovka are Novomykhailivka and something like this. And the Russians are going to push there very soon, and obviously the Russians are going to do this not just let's say in Novomykhailivka, but also something is going to happen in Ugledar as well. Furthermore, the Russians continue, let's say, effective counter-artillery duels, and as a result of another FPV drone strike, the Ukrainians lost another artillery system or mortar positions, D-20 howitzer more precisely, in the area of Katerinovka, D-30. Now we are moving to Krasnohorivka. Lots of very interesting details and updates are coming from the town. The Russians, as you can see, intensified their FPV drone activity in the southern part. Obviously, the Russians decided to finish the battle for, let's say, the area to the south of the railways to establish connection between the Russian positions in the southern part and the Russian positions in the southeastern part. And now it's the best time to do this. Why is that? First of all, I'll remind you that a few days ago, the Russians destroyed the dam in Karlovka, the dam that Ukrainians were using to support their forces in Netailove, in Pervomaysk, and so on. But after the Russians destroyed the dam, Let's take a look at this video once again. This explosion took place on the 11th of April. The Russians destroyed the dam as a result of heavy artillery strike. And after the dam was destroyed, the water went from Karlovka water reservoir to the south. And of course, there was like a very bad situation. There is a flood in this area. The area was flooded. We have the first geolocated video from the direction, as you can see. Probably the Ukrainian driver was trying to bypass the area, but basically he was blocked by the water from all the sides, and by stepping back, by moving in the back direction, he was trying to find another solution, find another road, how to move from one point to another. This video we have already discussed in the morning, and today we got another photo, the satellite photo. I hope that the quality of the video and the photo gives you more or less understanding of the situation. If you take a look at this part where I'm moving the cursor, you're gonna see the water, the river was flooded, and now the big territory, a huge territory, is covered with water. So as you can see, this is the Karlovka water reservoir, and basically all these things, all these territories also covered with water. And if we once again at the possible area of the disaster, of this pollution, we can say that this entire area went under the water, and maybe the water moved further to the south, and maybe additional tree lines, additional, let's say, roads were covered with water as well. Anyway, the most important is that currently the Ukrainians in Krasnohorivka were using just two roads for support their forces. That was the first road, and this is the second road the Ukrainians were using. And obviously, and according to this video that was done in this what was made in this area, obviously both let's say roads underwater, and it's not like a very big disaster. It's not something that can't be resolved or fixed, but obviously the Ukrainians will require some time to fix this issue. But the question is whether the Ukrainians do have this time or they don't have it. So once again, this is the best solution. This is the best time for the Russians to start actions, to start acting on Krasnohorivka direction, because the Ukrainians lost, maybe temporary, but lost supply and support from the mainland. And the only way probably they can still have support along the railways is under complete Russian fire control. I'm talking about this road. Probably the Ukrainians do have some possibilities to use this road as well, but this area is under complete fire control. So very likely during the next few days we're going to receive additional updates about further Russian progress and additional Russian gains exactly on the southern, southeastern, and maybe even in the central part of Krasnohorivka. Now we are moving to Avdiivka direction. We have a lot of very interesting details. First of all, I would like to admit that and point your attention that the Russians continue successful, very successful counter-artillery duels. Significant number of tanks, artillery systems, armored vehicles were destroyed by the Russian Krasnopol accurate shell hit, and the Russians have complete superiority. And the most important, if we take a look at this video, we will also touch a little bit the topic of this destroyed dam and so on. Basically, after the Russians destroyed the dam and after the Russians destroyed the bridge between this northern and the southern part of Umanska, this small road between northern and the southern Karlovka water reservoirs is the only possible way, is the only solution for the Ukrainians how to redeploy some reinforcements from the mainland to Yasnobrodovka, Netailove, first of all, and to evacuate wounded or even to evacuate soldiers as well. And as you can see based on this video, these territories under complete Russian fire control. There were two geolocations of how the Russians managed to destroy two Ukrainian tanks on the direction. If we increase the numbers of updates, there was also fire anomaly in this area, which confirms that this territory is under complete Russian fire artillery control. And basically we can make a conclusion that Ukrainian forces who are currently located in the southern part of Umanska, Yasnobrodovka, and Netailove very likely are located in some kind of operational encirclement. Furthermore, today we got a very interesting report from Zelensky himself. If you remember, Zelensky, maybe you saw this event, maybe you haven't seen. There was a video from him where he visited some college and was talking with the students, and he told them that the situation in Avdiivka direction is very difficult and complicated, and he added that there was a unit in that direction who surrendered, and not surrendered, who left their positions, which lead to the situation of complete encirclement encirclement and creation of a Cauldron for another Ukrainian unit. Zelensky didn't tell us about the, let's say, about the number of battalion or brigade or something like this, but today we got more and more reports from the ground, and now we see and understand the entire situation. This event took place a few days ago, and if you remember, there was a video of captured significant number of captured Ukrainian prisoners of war of 25th Airborne Brigade that was redeployed recently from Kupiansk direction on this area. And there was a situation when the more or less control over the main supply roads was established by the Russians, and the Ukrainians of 25th Brigade was asking for some kind of evacuation, but Ukrainian commanders refused to, let's say, make any evacuation. So that's why the forces of 25th Separate Airborne Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine decided to surrender to the Russian armed forces in Avdiivka direction. And this was stated and confirmed also by the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation. And later other sources on the ground reported that almost 200 people, 200 soldiers, and when talking about different types of, let's say, forces, we can say that some type of forces, for some type of forces, it's around 1 battalion, surrendered after the commanders fled and refused to evacuate. And that situation led to complete collapse of this front line and significant Russian progress. Furthermore, as we discussed in the, let's say, a few minutes ago, the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation confirmed and reported that the Russians established complete control over Pervomayska. Now the situation is about to be resolved on this direction. Very likely the Russians during the next few days will establish complete control over the villages, like over at least the southern part of Imanska. The Russians will capture Yasnobrodovka, maybe they have already entered the area. The Russians will reach the Karlovka water reservoir. Obviously Netailove is going to fall as well very soon, and of course the Russians will cut the artillery pocket or salient between Nevoyska and Pervomayska itself, and obviously all these things, all these events are going to take place very soon, probably during the next week, and almost without any resistance, without any, let's say, counterattacks from the Ukrainian side. So very likely very soon we're going to see a very big and huge changes on the front line, exactly on Netailove, Yasnobrodovka direction. So let's wait, let's see what is going to be next, and this situation of course will lead to collapse or some difficult positions in situations in Krasnohorivka as well. Now we are moving to Avdiivka direction. As you can see, we also have significant number of geolocations and updates from the territory. The Russians continue offensive operation. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians conducted additional few more attacks on the Ukrainian positions from the north to the south. But for now, this is not like, it's unclear area. It's a difficult area to bypass due to minefields. So for now, the Russians are clearing the area, but it's very likely they're going to finish this very soon. And then the battle for Berdichi will be finished as well. And then the Russians will be able to change their focus to the north, and they will be able to start offensive in direction of Novobakhmutovka. Now let's talk about Ocheretina. Very important details and updates are coming from this territory. Just to remind you, the Ukrainian sources, pro-Ukrainian map, Deep State, today updated their map. We don't have any geolocations, any video confirming this, but they have updated their map showing these trenches, these 3 lines along the railways in direction of Ocheretina under complete Russian control. Of course, this is significant progress of the armed forces of Russian Federation, and the most important, the distance between the Russians' edge positions in the area and the first buildings, let's say, in this residential area that's located between the railways. The distance, more precisely, is less than 300 meters. So this is the distance of the short rifle fire. Another important thing, this residential area, this is one of the most important and one of the most, it's a vital area, it's a vital, decisive area for the armed forces of Ukraine, and who controls this, let's say, residential area, control everything around, Ocheretina, Novobakhmutovka. So if the Russians are able to establish control over this territory, then the second defense defense belt of the armed forces of Ukraine will collapse automatically. What does it mean? First of all, to understand the situation in this area, it's better to increase the numbers of updates since the beginning of April. And if we increase the numbers of updates, we're going to see significant Russian concentration of fire on the direction. The Russians started their pummeling and bombing and reducing this area to ruins a long time ago. They knew for sure that sooner or later they're going to start offensive on this direction. They destroyed the significant number of Ukrainian positions, artillery positions, warehouses, ammo depots, trenches, temporary positions, shelters, strongholds. A lot of things were destroyed, and when the foothold was ready, the Russians launched an offensive and they managed to get as close as possible to the area. But all these things took place and have been taking place since the beginning of April till, let's say, yesterday. And the question is, what is happening right now? What is the current status of this hill, of this stronghold? We have the satellite video, the satellite photo of this area. I believe you can recognize the things, the railways and this residential area itself, this Ocheretina, and the most important is these fire signs on the let's say western, eastern, northeastern part of the village. This is the fire signs, and this is not just the fire signs. Probably this is the results of work of TOS flamethrower system. So if we return back on map, we can say that this territory, exactly, particularly this part of this stronghold of this area, is under complete Russian fire control, and not just fire control. This area was under heavy Russian fire with TOS flamethrower systems. Obviously, the Russians are about to enter this territory and to start clashes for buildings and strongholds itself. Very complicated and difficult situation for the Ukrainians. We expect another breakthrough of Ukrainian defense exactly on this direction. Furthermore, the Russians tried to slow down the Ukrainians, and few more temporary positions were destroyed as a result of Iskander strikes. Few more buildings were destroyed with Ukrainian soldiers inside of them. So this is the situation on this direction. The situation is very complicated, and not just the movements in direction of Ocheretina is currently taking place. We always keep in our mind that the Russians also have some progress on the eastern flank of Novomykhailivka, and the Ukrainians confirmed the situation as well. So everything can be finished here very soon. Now we are moving further to Bakhmut Artyomov's direction. First, we're going to start with the southern direction of the area. The Russians during the previous 24 hours managed to destroy a significant number of Ukrainian artillery forces, artillery systems. The Russians continue very successful counter-artillery duels, artillery systems, ammo depots, warehouses, tank positions, air defense positions, where a significant number of these types of, let's say, equipment were destroyed during the previous few days, with Lancets, with Krasnohorivka, with just counter-artillery duels. So we see complete superiority from the Russian side. And the thing is that Ukrainians can't do anything. They just arrive to the area with another artillery system, with another Krab or another Paladin, and as soon as they get their fire position, in a minute, maybe in half an hour, the Russians destroy this position with something long range like Lancet or something like this. No chances for the Ukrainians to slow down the Russians. Furthermore, we got a few updates of few more attempts to attack the Ukrainians on the northern part of Klishchiivka. The Russians were trying to attack and to establish control, or at least to get inside of this defense belt. There is not a very big defense belt, but there are three trenches that altogether makes one big network of the fortifications. As a result of attack, the Russians managed to improve their positions a little bit, but not so much, at least according to Ukrainian videos, because the video was published by the Ukrainians, and now we don't know what exactly the Russians managed to achieve or not. Important things are coming from Chasiv Yar itself. The clashes for the area continues, and once again the pro-Ukrainian mappers, the deep state, confirms the complete collapse and control over Bogdanovka by the armed forces of Russian Federation. So according to the Russians, from now on Bogdanovka is under complete Russian control. Of course, this is significant progress, but everything is not so simple. When talking about Bogdanovka, sometimes changings of the color on the map means nothing, because let's take a look at this video. On this video we can see the work of Russian air forces, and the most important part is not this one but this video. Yes, also the Su-25 Su-25 at work. This part is the most important. The Russian storm aircrafts are flying on the fire position. They start bombing, and this is the farms that the Russians were bombing. And as you can see, this is a very big hill. This is a very big hill, and the settlement and buildings that located on the base of the hill is Bogdanovka itself. So as you can see, there is a very big distance, very big difference between the positions on the hill and Bogdanovka itself. So the Russians, to tell the truth, don't have chances to attack the area along this road. It's very unlikely the Russians are going to do this. They can attack the stronghold either from northeast or by trying to bypass Kalynivka from the south and to attack like something like this, and basically to force the Ukrainians to fall back. And telling the truth, this is exactly what the Russians are trying to do right now. They're not attacking in front. They try to bypass from the south, trying to enter to Kalynivka itself and just to force the Ukrainians to fall back. Other important things are coming from the northwestern part of Ivanovska, from the southern part of Chasiv Yar. The Russian sources, according to pro-Ukrainian mappers, managed to establish control over this part of the forest as well. And approximately this is the Russian control on this direction. Obviously significant results, as you can see. And also the Russians, based on these two videos, based on these two say reports from the north and from the south, are trying to do very simple thing. They try to bypass the eastern block of Chasiv Yar from the north, and of course to bypass this block from the north and from the south, and not even to start any clashes inside of it because it's too risky, too difficult, but even to cross the canal and to enter the central part of Chasiv Yar and to force the Ukrainians to fall back. But there is one important thing that's very likely, and some sources start confirming this, that the Ukrainians will currently don't have chances to evacuate. You know, that the thing is that the Russians have already established complete fire and FPV drone control over Seversky Donetsk Donbass Canal. This area is in the complete fire control. Just a few days ago, we were talking about another Ukrainian attempt to evacuate from the area using just a light vehicle. But that was impossible. As we can see, according to the video, the Ukrainian light vehicle probably got on minefield that was established by the Russian, distance mining method equipment. So not so good. And obviously, the Ukrainians inside of the eastern part of canal are waiting just for one thing. They're waiting for rotation and evacuation. For now, they still have supplies, still have weapon. They can fight, but sooner or later they will be out of ammo. And then they will require and ask for evacuation, and they will receive the same answer that the soldiers of 25th Brigade received in Yasnobrodovka direction. There are going to be no evacuation, and as soon as they receive this, answer, they will have just few things to decide what to do: or surrender or to stay there forever. And I think they will surrender. So this is the situation in Chasiv Yar. Now we are moving further to the north in direction on the Sivers direction. The Russians continue offensive operation. The Russians continue very heavy strikes on the railways, on the Ukrainian positions along the railways, by trying to prepare the foothold for further offensive operation. Very likely during the next few days we're going to receive more updates about further Russian progress. We see some Ukrainian resistance, but it's not something that we used to see even half a year ago. Furthermore, according to different mappers, the Russians also managed to establish control over the rich network of the fortifications that are located on the hill in this area. And if this report is correct, then the Russians obviously managed to achieve significant results, because this is not just the trenches, this is the possible possible foothold for further offensive to Ivanodarivka, Vyimka or Spornaya. We start receiving updates from Verkhneykamyanska. We haven't been receiving any updates from Verkhneykamyanska probably from the 2022, when the Russians just finished the battle for Lysychansk, and when the Russians were trying to move further to Siversk, and the Russians were stopped in Verkhneykamyanska. And now we start receiving every day almost more and more updates from the village of how the Russians were bombing and attacking this territory with FABs, which confirms that the Russians are moving focus. focus. They're moving focus further to the west, trying to stop the Ukrainian rotation, trying to prevent the Ukrainian, let's say, entering the reinforcements on the direction. So this is some kind of preparation before possible further offensive from this stronghold to Verkhnyokamyanska itself. And if when the Russians enter Verkhnyokamyanska, this is going to be, let's say, the final page for the Battle of Siversk. Bilogorovka, no changes on the ground. We still haven't received any confirmations whether the Russians managed to capture the hill. Maybe yes, maybe not. For now, no updates, so let's wait. Southern Kupiansk direction, we have no changes, just a video from the Ukrainian side of how they were bombing the Russian forces. Probably they were trying to test and to understand the level of defense of the armed forces of Russian Federation on this direction, and very likely the Ukrainians will try to counterattack, because the Ukrainians are in a very big trouble. They have problems on every single front line. Maybe just this area is the only front line where the Ukrainians have more or less stable position. And now the Ukrainians have two options. First is to redeploy some forces from this direction, let's say to Avdiivka, to stabilize the area, or the second option, to launch a counteroffensive, let's say on the southern Kupiansk direction, with the purpose to, let's say, force the Russians to redeploy some reserves on this area for stabilization. If you ask my opinion, I would send reinforcements to the south. I would send some forces from this area to the south, but we know Zelensky, we know Ukrainians, for them counteroffensive is like a tasty piece of cake. They always want to show some victories on the ground, so that's why we can expect the Ukrainian counterattacks with the purpose not to capture something, but to force the Russians to slow down, to get slower on some direction, and to send reinforcement here. Northern Kupiansk direction, we have received probably for the first time for the previous few months, maybe weeks, of how the Russians start bombing and attacking Sinkovka once again with Tosla and Tower systems. The Russians stopped any activity on the Sinkovka directions a few months ago, after most of their attacks during the winter period of time were repelled by the Ukrainians, and now we see that maybe the Russians are planning to renew their offensive, and now they've started everything from the beginning. Who knows what is going to be next. Kharkiv direction, the Russians continue the preparation and clearing of the area before possible buffer zone offensive operation. The Russians were bombing Liptsi with FAP, significant number of strikes, very heavy explosions, FAP 1500. The Russians still haven't started using the FAP 3000, but obviously they're going to do this, and they're going to do this very soon. Kiev, what have we got from Kiev? Few more details and updates as well. As we discussed, the Russians in the summer, according to the Ukrainians, are planning to start offensive. Probably it will take place in 4 directions. Germany will help Ukraine, and they will send another Patriot system to Ukraine. It's very risky, of course, but obviously we understand that the Ukrainians have no other option. And obviously Germany will send their Patriot system to the western part of Ukraine to protect the gas storage in the vicinity of Stry village. Probably there are some let's say Western countries investments to that storage, let's say, but we see that the price for gas is start growing after the Russians start bombing the Stry area. So that's why we understand that the European countries, to stabilize the gas market, they need to provide and to show some stability in the western Ukraine, especially in the vicinity of that gas storage. They need to stabilize the market, and they need to reduce the price for gas. So that's why I believe that was the main reason why Germany sent the Patriot system, just for stabilization and not to allow to start the growth of the price for gas, because of course it's always in Russian favor. And today we got a very interesting video from the western part of Ukraine. And during the previous few days, if you remember, the Russians conducted significant number of missile strikes, and the Russians managed to destroy a power plant in Kiev region. And today we got another video of how the Russians destroyed the power plant in the western part of Ukraine. And as you can see, there is a construction. This is the power plant. If we zoom in better, we're going to see the power plant on the map. This is Dobrotov power plant. As you can see, this is the pipeline. This is the pipeline on the map. So once again, very likely that this power plant was also destroyed as a result of Russian missile strikes that took place during the previous few days. So this is the situation, and that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds you, we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, punch your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.